Guns can provide criminals with a false sense of invincibility. Confronted by police, they believe that the guns give them the equalizing force, an escape route. Such a belief often proves to be a mistake.
A suspected robber takes refuge from police in a swamp north of Bangkok. Though cornered and heavily outnumbered, he takes a shot at his pursuers. Immediately the police let loose their firepower upon him. Locals gather round to claim their stolen possessions. A car chase in America ends as police pursue an armed robber. Although he has no chance of escape, he forces them to stop him by any means necessary. Eventually pushed off the road, he refuses surrender and is killed in a hail of gunfire.
It's a very sad moment. They were put into a position where they had no choice anymore. It was not a decision of their own. The suspect made the decision for them.
Officers opened fire as they approach a roadblock. A female hostage forced to drive the getaway van jumps out of the vehicle and heads for cover. In a barrage of gunfire, the suspects speed off, out of control.
A hostage drama in Venezuela. Two men are caught robbing a flat. Surrounded, they take two women hostage at gunpoint. One of the kidnappers demands a getaway car. Eventually, one kidnapper surrenders and is led away. The remaining man opens fire without warning, wounding two police officers. Against the odds, he makes an attempt to escape, but in vain. Finally, the police lose their patience and raid the flat. In the ensuing mayhem, both kidnapper and hostage are killed.
A hostage held at gunpoint is a terrifying sight. Hostage situations test the skills and the nerves of law enforcers to the limit.
A siege at a bank in Mexico City. Held at gunpoint is the bank manager. The robber demands a car to make good his escape, with the bank manager and a customer as hostages. For the police, a split-second decision means the difference between life and death. As he prepares to make his getaway, the decision is made. Take the gunman.
As far as hostage situations are concerned, they are as old as violent conflict in society itself. I mean, there are hostage situations mentioned in Greek epics and tragedies and in the Bible and so on. It's really not a new phenomenon. It's an obvious piece of thinking, if you like. That said, I do think there's something very interesting in this phenomenon of people who take hostages and thereby think that they've rendered themselves completely invulnerable. Is it a suicidal impulse? Is it a sense in which, 30 years in the slammer is such an awful fate that it's better to go out in a blaze of glory and bullets, sort of Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid style, or what?
In Venezuela, a deranged young man has taken a local woman hostage. He warns the police not to attack or the woman will be killed. The police attempt to negotiate. Finally, they move in and the order is given to fire.
I think it's amazing to me how easily criminals, in quotes, seem to feel they could run away from superior police forces that surround them. It's fantastic, actually, to think of how often people who know they can't get away, who know they can't shoot it out, actually give it a whirl. Now, why?
Foi cercado pela polícia numa rodovia perto da cidade. Durante mais de 3 horas, ele manteve Cíntia com uma faca no pescoço. Todas as tentativas de negociação deixam o homem mais nervoso.
Tá vendo aqui? É uma criança, tá na mão dele. errar o tiro, bye bye. O que fizer errar, bye bye.
Aos poucos, os policiais se aproximam. O PM age em menos de um segundo.
An escaped convict is using a baby as a hostage. With his gun to the baby's head, he demands a getaway vehicle. The police follow him as he makes his escape, heavily armed. Somehow, the gunman manages to lose him on the bridge and jumps into the river, escaping despite the hail of gunfire.
Thinking goes in situations like this, and the old fight-flight reflex everybody knows about kicks in. So that what you have to consider when hostage takers or bank robbers who've been surrounded or criminals whose fate is absolutely sealed make a hopeless break for it, what you have to consider is these are not now mentally functioning, thinking human beings. They're terrified, charged up animals, and that their behaviour can't be understood by ordinary human standards. When I say animals, I don't mean animals as in disgusting, violent animals. I mean just that we can't understand it by reference to developed thought process. One has to understand it more by reference to the primitive side of the individuals concerned.
5 passengers are being held hostage in this Brazilian standoff. The gunmen are demanding a car, and the police prolong negotiations in an attempt to tire them out. One hostage pleads for a peaceful solution while a gun is pointed to his head. As dawn breaks, 2 of the men decide to surrender. Meanwhile, a lone shot rings out, injuring a pregnant woman. The police move in.
Flying bullets test a law enforcer's nerves. Courage under fire is essential, as is accuracy and good judgment. Safety of the innocent is paramount. The aim, a bloodless conclusion, where possible.
How you doing? All right. You want to lock that door for me? Huh? Lock the door. Lock what door? Lock that door. Back over here. You hold it right there, buddy. Put that knife down. Lay down on the ground. Get on the ground. Get out on the ground. Perfect. Perfect, Bobby. Don't you move, my friend. You feel like you know what that is? Don't let nobody come in, Rick. Don't let nobody come in. Get out of here.
In the hands of the law enforcers, a gun is supposed to be a force for good, but often a bloodless conclusion proves elusive. The White House, Washington. A man armed with a hunting knife has been surrounded by police. He refuses to drop his weapon, and the police open fire.
The officers stopped him at the sidewalk. There was a confrontation. They tried to maintain him. He did not drop his knife. A backup officer got on the scene and ordered him to drop his knife 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure how many times. The man was still brandishing the knife, therefore the officer shot him.
Do you believe he carried the knife that was the proper response under those circumstances?
Yes, I do.
For moments, the police freeze, unsure of what to do. An officer calls an ambulance, and the wounded man is taken to hospital. A woman wielding a gun has been cornered by police. They demand that she drops her weapon. When she fails to comply, they open fire. Although the woman later dies, the police are cleared of any wrongdoing.
Suspect down! Suspect down!
A deadly shootout in a North Hollywood parking lot. Up against a heavily armed duo bent on wreaking destruction, the police have to resort to raiding a gun shop in their attempts to stop them. Shedding blood in the line of duty is one thing, but some law enforcers go much further. At a state prison in California, former prison officers brought evidence that some guards were staging fights between inmates from rival gangs and even placing bets on the outcome.
The violence was well beyond what any place should be. I would have an average of 1 to 5 shootings on my 8-hour shift.
Security camera evidence shows guards allowing a fight to begin and then opening fire to stop it.
Let's get ready to rumble. And then they would release two opposition gang members.
Gun use in the United Kingdom is less prevalent than in some other countries. Firearms incidents, however, are on the increase. The British Bobby routinely is unarmed, but now specially trained officers carry guns.
Over the last 20 years, the role of the traditional policeman in Britain has changed. Greater violence on the streets, more gun-related crimes, and the general change in our society has affected the police on every level. Calls for routine arming of the police are frequent, as are the requests for more powerful means of preventing tragedy and destruction. Over the last 10 years, gun-related crime in Britain has increased by over a third. Since 1983, the number of armed officers has been reduced by around 80%. Following a number of tragedies, it was decided that armed police would be limited in number, but would receive highly specialised training. Their presence would be limited only to firearms incidents.
The armed elite basically are people who ride around in vehicles known as armed response vehicles, who are armed to deal with all kinds of firearms incidents, whether they be armed robberies or indeed terrorism, and who have full-time access to firearms.
It's a strike, strike, strike. Oh, please stand still! Get on the floor now! Get down! Down! Spread your arms out to the side, palms up!
Searching. Firearm.
Although the number of incidents involving firearms has increased, the police rely on their armed elite to respond quickly and efficiently.
Loaded, one in the spout. Firearm.
These officers are full-time firearms officers. They're not on the beat 1 minute and then being asked to report to a station and draw a firearm the next. They are a state of constant readiness in order to be able to deal with the armed crime.
This rare piece of footage shows the armed elite in action.
Oh my God!
Despite gunfire, the suspect is apprehended alive.
We get to the stage now where there's something like between 7,000 and 10,000 incidents a year. There are a number of incidents when police officers actually discharge their weapons, when they actually fire their guns, is only a handful. It ranges between 3 and 6 in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's very, very few incidents when you compare it against the number of incidents that police are responding to.
In recent years, there have been frequent calls for the routine arming of the police following a number of high-profile shootings.
Every time a police officer gets knifed or shot dead in this country, there is a debate about whether the police should be armed. I think what we're seeing is less firearms officers but more armed incidents. But I think because they've changed the tactics and the way that they actually tackle those, that they have more than enough resources to actually tackle the armed crime that undoubtedly happens on the street.
For those armed officers, firearm training is essential. This training instills an extensive code of practice, maximising reaction time, safety and accuracy. A gun can be drawn in around a second, so it's essential those in possession make the right move at the right time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep, that's okay.
In Britain, the level of training is among the best in the world. Extensive testing is required for those wishing to receive a firearms ticket to ensure they have the correct mental attitude to respond and make split-second decisions. Once the officer receives their firearms ticket, They are given extensive training in the use of a wide range of firearms and in tactical training.
Right, good afternoon. I'll have a look for you.
Thank you.
Freeze on, please! Get on the floor! Get on the floor! I haven't done anything! I haven't done anything! Get off! Hey!
Down on your knees, on your knees.
Get off!
Face down on the floor. Stay still.
Get off!
Stay still.
Get off! Get off! Hey!
Firearms are only for those who choose to make the grade. In Britain, no police officer is forced to carry a gun against his or her will.
Some of the arguments about whether the British police should be armed as a whole or not centre on the fact that a lot of officers don't want to carry guns simply because they don't like them and wouldn't want the responsibility of having to maybe use them. So they're not forced to actually go through the tests at all.
Watch the threat area.
Those who do go through the tests are given sophisticated equipment to sharpen their skills, such as laser-guided target practice.
That would be a basic scenario. You hear shots, you tell the trainees they've been called to an incident, they're on a containment position, firearms are being used, out comes a criminal, he's got a gun in his hand, they've heard shots, what are they got to do with it? Now if they do nothing, he will just come out, have a look probably, may shoot and run away. And if they stay behind cover and did nothing, fine, that's the consequence. He runs away and maybe into a public area. But then we would take them through that thought process and say, well, what are the consequences of doing nothing? You know, these decisions you've got to go through. But of course there comes a point where there may be a conflict, where the criminal may take aim at the police position. Then the police officer's got to decide what to do. Now, it may well be that the police officer here has decided, well, I can't stop this criminal any other way. It represents a danger to my life, to other people's lives. I'm going to have to shoot to stop that threat. And so he does, or she does.
Police forces around the world invest millions updating their armed response capabilities. Faster and more sophisticated weapons are constantly being developed as part of their war on crime.
A lot of it's drug-related, and I suppose the worrying aspect for police officers is a lot of the guns that are being used are illegal and highly powerful weapons using types of ammunition which we haven't seen in this country before, some of which is coming from Eastern Europe, but others which is carried by criminals, which is being used in the United States. But I don't think we'd ever see a situation in this country, as we've had in the States, for example, where some of the forces there have been issued with explosive bullets which are actually against the Geneva Convention.
In America, it is estimated that 8 out of every 10 bullets will miss their target. When they do, they often ricochet with deadly consequences.
Shooting in a regular building, say a concrete block building, you might not kill yourself, but certainly you're going to kill part of your team because that bullet is going to be bouncing around in there.
To combat this, a new bullet has been developed to prevent just that, and it's something the police are keen to exploit to save their own lives as well as others. Of course, it's not just conventional weapons that the police have to face. Recent innovations are proving to be just as much of a concern. This remote control $50,000 rifle is the latest in high-tech weaponry which is becoming available for the American public.
Guns have a fundamental problem that you have to have your head up in the line of fire. So for the first time you're able to be safe, you're out of the way. That's the first thing. The second thing is the combination of man and machine eliminates errors so that this actually fires perfectly. For biological or chemical weapons, this can be out on top and the officer can be nice and safe somewhere operating. It's a bit like a video game, but it doesn't miss. The key is it doesn't miss and the person is very safe.
There it is.
Target confirmed. On my mark, take 3 shots to the head. Mark.
In the United Kingdom, however, we're unlikely to come up against such weapons as this rifle, and for most officers the emphasis is on weapons of deterrent rather than destruction.
Drop the weapon! Drop the weapon!
With the emphasis on tools of restraint, the police in the UK now carry a range of new equipment. Longer truncheons, CS gas and the newly trialled pepper or mace sprays are the chosen means of disabling a violent offender. Surveys have confirmed that the police prefer these items to guns and that they help them to feel safer on the beat.
There was a situation where British police officers, before these items of equipment were introduced, were carrying around a truncheon which had been standard issue for like 100 years and nothing had changed.
It makes me feel a lot more confident knowing that I've got something that can protect me. A person who's going to endanger me, I can incapacitate them straight away.
It's strange, I really can't open my eyes.
In order to further improve their safety on the streets, the police announced a number of firearms amnesties in recent years. The opportunity for members of the public to bring in their illegal weapons means that many tools of destruction are removed from the equation of violence. But amnesties are likely to be limited in their effectiveness.
I don't think gun amnesties work at all. I think they are a symbolic gesture. But in terms of some of the weapons that are handed into the police, you'll find a lot of these weapons are either deactivated or would blow up in somebody's face if you tried to fire them. These are guns which have been hanging around in houses for 30 or 40 years and are not considered to be a real threat to public peace. The real threat in terms of armed crime is the illegally held weapons, which obviously aren't by definition going to be handed in during amnesties. Following the Dunblane tragedy, we probably now have the toughest firearms regulations and laws in the world. And I think if you look at the number of arms incidents, even though it's been increasing, we are still probably one of the safest countries in the world when it comes to armed crime and the police response to it.
I can't see that any perception about guns is going to change to the extent that there would be a global movement for the eradication of firearms from the planet. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think that the gun and its big brothers, which would go right up to the nuclear bomb, are the distinguishing feature of the 20th century.
If the children are responsible, it's fine. But if they're not very responsible, probably have an adult with them.